Africa residential real estate hidden side. Hello, my name is Collie Brown. Welcome to Africa Business Channel TV. Today we're going to be talking about the African residential real estate market. We're going to talk about its impact, which is pretty big on the economy of Africa itself. And we're also going to be talking about some hidden things that we should all be aware of. So let's talk about the size. Right now, the Africa residential real estate, the market's roughly around 45 to 50 billion US dollars. But it has the potential to go up to somewhere in the region of about 500 billion US dollars, which is approximately half a trillion US dollars, which is pretty big. But for that to happen, quite a number of things have to take place. So let's talk about what's the makeup of the real estate developers in Africa. So Africa has basically two different groups. One are the local developers and the other one are foreign developers. The local developers tend to be very small. They tend to be many times individuals, but they're talking about, we're talking about somewhere in the region of 3, 4, 5, 6 buildings being worked on simultaneously. So they're very small, and oftentimes it's an individual contractor. Now, when we talk about the foreign ones, they tend to do larger groups, larger development projects. So, for example, they'll be doing something like 100 buildings, 100, single-family homes, or they might do an apartment building, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 floors or more being developed. So they tend to go after larger projects. Now, with respect to employment, the real estate sector, the construction sector, the vast majority of the work being done in African residential real estate are low-skilled, low-pay jobs, manual work. Essentially, it's labor. You're paying for labor, cheap, inexpensive manual labor. And that makes up probably, I would say, about 60 to 75% of the actual labor work that goes into the manufacturing. Then you have a smaller middle level, which is semi-skilled, and we're talking about plumbers and electricians and people with that sort of a skill level. They tend to be a lot less of them, but they get better pay than you would if you were one of those other low-skilled manual worker. And then at the very apex of that, you have the people like the architect and the engineers and the contractor. Those are high-skill, high-paid jobs, but they are far smaller group than any of the other group. So the bulk of work is done by low-paid people, and then a slightly larger but very small middle level, the professional group, so to speak, and then the high-level intellectual level contractor, architects, and engineers. So that is the level that we're talking about in terms of skill sets, those three different levels. At this point, if you have not done so, please like, share this video. It doesn't cost you anything and it will help us a lot. So now let's take a look at what actually goes into the building of, construction of a residential building. So let's look at the money breakdown. We've talked about salaries. We talked about essentially the human element, the workforce, the direct workforce. And we talked about the fact that there are three different levels. Now, let's talk about the content, because the remainder of the money is devoted to what goes into the building, the equipment, the materials, all the different things that goes into the construction, and the outfitting of the house. So that includes the fixtures and all of that. That's divided up into two groups. There's a local content, and then there is the imported content. So let's start off with the local content. Typically, what you'd find in the local content, you'd find sand, you'd find gravel, and sometimes you'll find cement. Now, cement is an interesting one because in many African countries, cement is actually imported from overseas. Africa does manufacture its cement, but again, some countries, the actual cement is imported. And when we talk about, high-rise construction, multi-floor buildings, the foreign developers tend to want to bring almost everything that they need to complete the construction. That includes cement as well. The sand and gravel, typically, that is sourced locally in some local quarries or in a river, in the case of sand, a local river. The other portion of this is the imported piece. And this is really what I want to talk about. Because a significant chunk of the real estate development at buildings completion involves the importation of stuff. And it is this piece of the construction site that I want to talk about, because there's a lot of stuff that's kind of hidden from the consumer, the average person who's buying a home or who's building a home. They might not necessarily know all that it takes to build a home and where those things are coming from. So when the outfitting of homes consists of a lot of imported stuff, right? But those imported stuff means that the stuff is being manufactured overseas, which means that the college graduates, the engineering graduates in Africa don't have engineering jobs because the product is not being made locally. It's being made overseas. So in the construction business in Africa, what we are doing is guaranteeing jobs for people overseas. Also, when a high school graduate graduates in Africa, we're also ensuring that they don't have, for example, a job in a factory making some of these stuff that we import. Oftentimes these things are made on assembly line and the pay is good. And so therefore, that is being deprived from the young African who has graduated high school. Because again, we are ensuring that job stays overseas because we're importing the product from overseas. Now, I am going to go over a number of items that could be manufactured locally. If they were to be manufactured locally, it would result in tens of thousands of jobs. Each one of these items that I'm going to be talking about. Tens of thousands of jobs. And it would generate anywhere from $250 million US dollars to $1 billion US dollars in terms of industry. That's the size of the industry that we're talking about. And this is across the whole 54 countries, the whole African continent. So let's take a look at that and see what the breakdown. Let's break it down by various parts of the house. Let's start off with the kitchen. So in the kitchen, for example, you'd have the kitchen sink, you'd have the kitchen faucet, and you'd also have the kitchen cabinet. And along with that, you'd also have the cabinet handles, the things, the pulls that are on the cabinet. You'll have things like the stove, you'll have the refrigerator, and even the countertops you would think would be local. No, a lot of that is also imported from overseas. And notice I said overseas, meaning outside of the continent of Africa. Now let's go to the bathroom and take a look at some of the things that are imported. So the bathroom sink, the bathroom faucet, the sink for the bathroom faucet, the bathtub is also imported. The shower faucet is imported. The toilet is imported. Even the mirror in the bathroom is imported. And of course, there's the bathroom cabinets. Those are imported. And again, each of these that we're talking about are tens of thousands of jobs for local African kids who are graduating university and as engineers or graduating high school, that could work on the assembly line. But instead, most of the jobs that are available to them are what we call the manual labor, essentially someone who mixes the concrete and someone who carries cinder block and things like that. Now let's go on to the next piece, which is the actual house itself. And these are things that are all imported for the most part. We have the light fixture, we have the light switches, we have the electrical panel, and that is that little panel that have basically the circuit breakers and things like that. That's imported. We have the electrical wiring. Africa does make some electrical wiring, but the vast majority of it is imported. Gypsum board, that's imported. Roofing material. The vast majority of roofing material in Africa is imported. We have floor tiles and we have wood floor. Now let me talk about wood floor a second, because this is the craziest part of the whole thing. The wood floors, the wood itself, the tree, comes from Africa. It's cut down, put on ships, and sent overseas. Now, when it goes overseas, they use machines to mill the tree and to create wood flooring, or the wood flooring slabs. And then that is exported from that country and imported back into Africa at many, 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 many times the value of the original lumber that was exported. So the actual work plus the high value means that the young worker overseas has the job, and the significant amount of foreign exchange is leaving the continent to pay for the importation of those items. So now that we've seen the sort of the hidden side, what is happening in terms of jobs, that millions and millions of jobs are being exported and billions of dollars are being sent out of the country on a daily basis to import the raw materials and the fixtures to complete a construction. What can Africa do about it? Well, there's a lot we can do about it, but who are responsible? Who's the parties responsible to take care of this problem? Well, there's the real estate developer. They're the first parties in the process. They could source many of the stuff they import from overseas. They could source it locally. Now, the real estate developer will say, we can't find anybody. We don't know where these suppliers are, so we can't really buy from them. So therefore, we bring stuff in from the outside. Well, the good news for these developers, there is a product called Kubwa. It's an online trading platform where you can source all of these raw materials, everything you need. You can source that from African manufacturers. There's a link to it in the description below. Let's go on to the next party. The next party is the government. Government can do something about it. The government, first of all, can set up regulations to say certain percentage of content must come from African sources. So that's one way to do that. The government could also stimulate investments in manufacturing certain elements that are used in the fixture. So government could say to a manufacturer, okay, if you produce some of these items that are being imported, we'll give you a tax credit, we'll give you maybe a low-cost loan, whatever the case may be. Government policy can encourage the manufacture of these things locally and within Africa. That said, the most powerful person, or the most powerful individual, the most powerful one that can make a difference is you and I. Yes, you and I, the consumer, the person buying the house. You can say, or you can demand, that the house that you're about to purchase have much more African content. You can demand, you can say to the developer, I will not buy this house unless it has a certain percentage of African made content. For example, you could insist that the doors and windows all come from Africa. You could insist on that. You could insist that the floor come from Africa. The tile comes from Africa. You could insist on a number of different things, but you have the power to do just that. You have the power to demand, because you're the one purchasing it. You have the final say. And no developer will turn down good money if you insist that they increase the content, the level of African content in that home. They may not be able to do the whole thing or 100%, but they should strategically increase the amounts of stuff that they put in that are locally sourced, locally made. For those of you who are sending money back home to build, you can insist that the contractor buys local products, local fixtures, local materials in the construction. You know, if we don't fight for the young people in Africa, who is going to fight for them? You're the one with the money buying the house. They can't buy the house. It's your money. You can use your money to do two things. You can get yourself a really nice house with no compromise in terms of quality, and at the same time ensure that young Africans, when they graduate university or engineering school, that they have jobs, because they have jobs engineering the fixtures, the light fixtures, different things that go into making a home a complete home. You can ensure that that happens with your purchase. You don't have to compromise. No one is saying that you should take inferior products from local. No, you demand that you get high quality, locally manufactured goods. So that is the little secret. That is the hidden secret in terms of African manufacturing, African construction. Most of the high-end fixtures that come into Africa are imported, not manufactured locally. And that is not a good thing for our young people. Take the time. Please ask the developers to ensure that they use as much of the content from local sources as possible. If you have not already done so, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching.